Donald Trump presidency is good for the entire world. The current world crisis, in particular the Middle East instability, is a product of the Democrats and President Barack Obama and Secretary Hillary Clinton in particular. They are the reason as to why we don't have Libya, we don't have Egypt, we don't have Iran, we don't have Syria, we don't have Jordan. And I think the maturity with which Donald Trump comes again for this presidency will most likely bring world stability.
Yes.
For whatever reason. Of course, it is taken. Any American president will support Israel. But Republicans have tended to be more definitive,
Tougher,
open and tough, as opposed to Democrats who have been conniving, labyrinthal, and covert. We need Donald Trump because we know Donald Trump. We do not know Harris.
Donald Trump has toppled Biden administration to become the 47th president. So from 45th to 47th president of the United States of America. A very interesting, very interesting news that has really shocked the world. I'll be a bit more curious on the Biden administration for some 3 or 4 reasons that I want to say here. But of course, in this podcast, we are going to look at Meg Whitman, who now, I'm going to show you why she'll now have to leave Nairobi embassy back to Washington. And of course, with the new change of guard in the US, what exactly is it? And with Meg Whitman now leaving Nairobi, what exactly has the Ruto administration lost in Meg Whitman? So this will be a very interesting podcast to you. But then, first, I want to just draw your attention to this article here. There was an article that was done some few days ago. That was on November 3rd. This article, U.S.-Africa relations under Joe Biden, a mismatch between talk and action. And the writers, it was done in one of the global newspapers. So actually, Nation just copy-pasted that story. I think they bought it, and so it is actually Nation. And that story is talking about what the relationship between Biden and the Biden administration and Africa. And they're saying it's been just much of the talk, but not so much in terms of action. A position that PLO Lumumba is putting out clearly in her verdict on the Trump administration, the impact of Trump administration in Kenya and Africa. I think if you're so curious about this, I would really want you to get to listen to this, because there is something I want to ask you, and probably I know our viewers from the US will stand a better chance to help us unpack this.
Trump, of course, was a former president, and the argument was in the United States that he had rapport with President Putin of Russia, and that could very well help in resolving the conflict in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. And you remember at one time, when Trump was the president, he also had very tough words against NATO, asking them to pick up the bills. So I am of the view, which is subject to being second-guessed, that a Trump presidency may very well be the presidency that will quicken the end of the wars. That is my own view. But easier said than done. One must be cautious in making such statements. I've always held the view that nothing changes dramatically, and I say this because the United States foreign policy, when one talks about Kenya or Africa, remains fundamentally constant. But there are those who observe, and I'm one of them, that during Republican presidencies, the United States of America does appear to support many more programs than during the Democratic presidencies, which is full of rhetoric and short on action. And I am of the view that the United States of America is going to be very active in Africa as a reaction to China and Russia, and as a reaction to other players such as the Emiratis and the Turks. Take, for example, in the single area, the Belt and Road Bridge program that is being done by the Chinese. The Americans are already responding with what is called the Lobito Corridor, which is to build a railway from Lobito in Angola through to Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo for purpose of extraction of minerals. And of course, they will also be reacting to the presence of Russia in the Sahel region and the presence of China as one of the leading partners of many African countries. So one will begin to see once again Africa being a theater of contestation of different powers, and those powers are the United States of America. Of course, one sees that even France, and it's not lost on me that the French have actually announced that they'll have a meeting of the Francophonies in 2026 in Kenya. Beggars belief. I do not know why they should do that. Kenya is not a Francophonie. You've seen the British also through the Commonwealth becoming a lot more aggressive. The Turks are equally aggressive. The Emiratis are equally aggressive. The Chinese are a little bit more subtle. They don't make as much noise as others do, but you see them in different areas. So what is going to happen is that we are going to see a United States of America which thinks that is losing its grip, and therefore whoever wins, it is going to be a time for activity in the continent of Africa. The United States of America is a country that cannot be ignored. It still has the strongest economy in the world. It is hegemon militarily. It is a strong nation. Economically, it is a strong nation. And the reality of the world is that the law of the jungle is still alive and well, is survival of the fittest, the dying of the least suitable, and in truth, power still springs from the barrel of the gun. So we in the continent of Africa must pay attention. You remember that the United States of America has a basis in a number of African countries, and going forward, we must define, particularly in the continent of Africa, we must define how we are going to engage with the United States of America. And my considered view is that a strong Africa will be able to engage in a much more creative and symbiotic way. A weak Africa will be manipulated by the United States of America, notwithstanding who is the president of that country after the 5th day of November, and of course after inauguration in the month of January 2025.
I've grasped one thing, and I want to ask for our viewers. I know I have quite a significant population from the US following this channel. But Lumumba is saying that during Republican administration, contrary to public media narratives, actually foreign aid comes to Africa more during Republican administration than Democrats. But ordinarily, the Democrats are the ones that posture, are the ones that really posture as pro-Africa. But ironically, Lumumba is saying that during Republicans, on Republican administration, Africa would actually get more foreign aids because Democrats are full of words and actions, but without really words without action. And that this really coincides. This really this echoes what the writers in that article are saying. Probably you might even think Lumumba is there, and Lumumba is really giving a verdict on this. Now, hold on that, because when we are talking about Meg Whitman era, which is coming to an end in January, you will really have to revisit this. Now, let me tell you some 4 reasons why. Now there are 4 because there were 5, but one is one which I've mentioned. I'm so curious to follow Trump administration because of that. I want to see, is it really true that during Democrats, when Democrats are in power, Africa tend to gain more than Republicans. I really want to hear that. But the other thing is the fate of Biden deals with President Ruto in June in Africa as a continent. Biden had Africa, US, America, Africa summit, and President Ruto made a trip to the US, and there were some very multi-billion deals that were signed there. I want to see, is Trump going to pick those deals, including the Haiti mission and all that, or there's going to be an overhaul? I believe that most of us can help us this. The other, I'm so curious on, Trump is a very good friend to Putin. Putin is one of the forces behind BRICS. BRICS is a bloc that is supposed to de-dollarize the world. So how is he going to balance about that? Quite interesting. The other one is about America war tool, Russia-Ukraine war and Israel. I'm so curious on that. And again, now that he's coming for his second term, his second and final term. Remember, he had served the first term. So this is going to be his second and final term. What will be his leadership mantra? Will he go populist? Will he try to, how will he really do that? Because sometimes when a president is in power and is still seeking a second term, he tends to try to please the masses. So I'm so curious because remember, one of the strong grounds why on which he was campaigning on was that Biden administration, there was decline of the US economy, and that was really leveled against Biden if you followed those campaigns. So I promise you, in this podcast, we'll be so curious. We have quite a number of subscribers that are so curious in international politics. So away from our local picky ponky here, I would really follow the Biden administration. Now, Nairobi regime under President Ruto appears unenthusiastic about Trump's historic comeback. Yes. This is a position that quite diplomatic analysts have been raising here. It took a bit too long for the President Ruto to congratulate Trump. India president did their message last night. Quite a couple of presidents, Zambia, and quite a number of African presidents made their point, their congratulation messages earlier. And President Ruto, imagine, just did his 1 hour ago before I was posting this photo. After before I did this podcast, after quite a number of other Kenyans had sent their congratulations. Now, and I said from my previous video that I did on the Trump on that year's election that Nairobi had been vouching for Biden administration, of course for obvious reasons. But Trump now, the U.S. population have found it right within their conscience to change their regime. Quite $1 million lessons for this country, Kenya, to learn. We look at that. Azimio leaders are rekindling events of the last general election and actually mocking Meg Whitman about her fate. Of course, remembering on how she meddled with Kenyan elections.
On the one hand, I'm not a Trump supporter because he doesn't support the women's agenda, and I'm a very ardent supporter of women. But on the other hand, the reason why I've been torn is because of the role the Americans played in the last elections. So what goes back comes back, bites you the way it bit us. I am consistent in supporting women publicly. And so the loss of Kamala Harris is my loss. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that back to my science issue, I just want to indicate that...
Honorable Millie Odhiambo, the last time I checked, Democrats can't define a woman.
Can't do what?
Can't define a woman.
Define?
A woman.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in our quarters where we are, you have always declared you are Republican. But I want to actually say that this is one of the American elections where I've been torn. On the one hand, I'm not a Trump supporter because he doesn't support the women's agenda, and I'm a very ardent supporter of women. But on the other hand, the reason why I've been torn is because of the role the Americans played in the last elections. So what goes back comes back, bites you the way it bit us. So let them live with that. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, but I'm still mourning the loss of Kamala Harris. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, let America also learn to keep off elections of other places and other areas. So it was sad. I would have really, but they've helped me because my pain is minimized somehow.
Nairobi, and to confirm to you that there have been a little bit of tension, Meg Whitman, the Kenyan ambassador, is yet to congratulate Trump on the US poll. I placed a call to one of our subscribers in Washington and I asked him this question. And what he has told me is that you never know, perhaps the Democrats are not going to, of course in the US they might not say they don't accept, but there would be echoes of election rigging and this and that, because it happened even when during Hillary Clinton versus Trump, there was some real information about election meddling. But I would be curious if Democrats would raise that, and of course it would be prejudice to say that at this time. The contest was more between Trump and Obama. Remember the beef between Trump and Obama back then? Yeah, when Obama said that Trump will go to record as the worst. And of course, even though Nani came into that race late, Kamala came into that race late, taking over from Biden, taking over the ticket from Biden, but she really made his stand. In diplomacy, it is a standard practice for American ambassadors appointed through political channels to step down when a new administration takes office. It is a courteous and respectful tradition in the US. And just on this, the White House will likely instruct all the US ambassadors who are political appointees to step down from their posts by Inauguration Day in January. And it is on this, that is why you see the probability, the chance that Meg Whitman reign in Kenya might come to a premature end in January. The likelihood is there. So this is something that is here. And on this podcast, we'll look at what Ruto will lose in it. Remember, Kenya made a foreign policy misstep. And I remember when we were analyzing the President Ruto's trip to the US, this is one of the factors that we really raised. The White House, Kenya made a foreign policy misstep by accepting the state visit. When a country is heading into elections, the prudent approach is to adopt a wait-and-see stance and avoid signing any major deals. And that is why I told you guys I'm a bit more curious on the fate of those deals that Kenya signed with the US. When I was saying why I'm curious, I mentioned this. So it is not a secret. Meg Whitman, the Kenyan ambassador under President Ruto, Kenyan ambassador, is likely on her way back to the US, probably being deployed elsewhere. But you can see, of course, she's a Democrat, probably because she worked with the Democrat administration, with the Biden administration. But I don't have sympathies for Meg Whitman because because she has actually had a terrible reign with President Ruto. This is what was the ugly face of Meg Whitman during the Ruto administration. It has been, for lack of a better word, it has been ugly. During her reign, immediately William Ruto was sworn into office, there have been a lot of globalist agenda. The LGBTQ discussion was around this country at that time. Remember the GMO debate? Immediately, I think that was in 2022 December, just months after President Ruto was sworn into office. So there was a whole discussion about introduction of the GMO products in the country, the maize and all that. And all this, there is currently a project of Bill and Melinda Gates on vaccination of cows in I think in Meru, and it really raised some questions on how exactly that is an agenda of the country. And even if you look at some of these major deals, the the deals that were really touted on technology development in the country, most of them were actually globalist agenda. So this to me has not, and because it is not secret that for the first time when Kenyans were voting during the election day in the Bomas of Kenya, Kenya witnessed a heavy presence of the diplomatic corps in the Bomas of Kenya, and they did heavy lifting on that election. So one of the terrible things that Ruto Meg chemistry has produced is a lot of globalist agenda, and even at the time, and even if the population was raising questions about this, she has been, and that brings me to number 2. She has been legitimizing William Ruto's missteps. Remember when they went to Eldoret on devolution conference? That was in 2023. And he said that Kenyan election in 2022 was the most transparent in the history of this country. In the backdrop of all these accusations of vote rigging and the split in the poll body and all that, and she's been coming out in quite several occasions. She's coming out and saying the country is in good state and the country is treading in the right path, and she's really been sanitizing. Even currently as we speak, I want to say this for the record. During Gen Z protest, there were violation of human rights. There were violation and high-profile violation of human rights, quite in very unthinkable standard, both 2023 and 2024. But US, despite the fact that they always have that caveat that they defend human rights, the voice of the US on that during those violations has been relatively low. Just recently, there was a trip by CIA boss and the head of intelligence, I think from the US, came in Nairobi, who is the head of intelligence who came in from Nairobi, and the FBI boss. And in a closed-door meeting with the president, there was a matter of just rubbing through matters of abduction and disappearances. But under her era, she's been legitimizing William Ruto's regime, even in the face of some very uncomfortable developments in the country. The other issue is about election influence. Trump may not be, I guess I'm not so much into this, but I think Trump may develop the policy of non-interference, because I know for a fact that when you listen his position on this matter of Ukraine-Russia war, he was saying in the first place that US was not even supposed to be involved in that conflict. He's asked why is even US involved in it. So on his side, he might actually develop non-interference policy on the Kenyan election. That is contrary to Meg Whitman, because she's a Democrat. On this meddling, she could probably posture as if she is advancing democracy. The wave of one-term presidency in the world is a very good news for this country. And I said that in this podcast, I will try to remind Kenyans once in a week that someone should not tell you that it is impossible, that you can't change. US have changed. Yes, when they felt that Biden was not doing the right thing, they've gone to the polls and they've changed. They've changed the president. Botswana changed. There is a one term in Botswana. Algeria the other day, I think it was, is it Liberia? They voted out where? George Weah after one term. And so, just like the world economies, you know, those who tell you that we want to be like US, want to be like Germany, we want to put Kenya where Germany is. The way they tell you want to put Kenya where US is, they must also tell you that US is where they are because when they feel that their president is not doing the right thing, they can change. But here, there will be a lot of fear selling, oh, you cannot, it is impossible, it has never happened. If we've never impeached the deputy president, we impeach the deputy president, fine. In Kenya, presidential election was the first cancelled. Even that US has never impeached their presidency. Yes. Even US have never impeached the president. If my memory serves me right. But you can challenge me if they once impeached their president. So it's a learning curve for the Kenyan voters. And that is why I tell you that I'll be so curious on following on Trump administration. When you feel that the message that Kenyans must grasp from the US poll, when you feel that the regime is not doing the right thing, then the right thing is to change the regime. The right thing is to change. And I want to say for the record here, Trump was not one of the best. If you just mirror his first term, he was not one of the best. By the way, to be honest, I don't fancy. I've never fancied Trump. Yes. I've never fancied Trump. In fact, on disrespect for the women, it was, no. If you read history, I followed part of what happened in July, the sex tape in July and all that. He's never that good man. But the US took the risk and said, oh, we don't want Biden, let's try him. Let's try him. So, Kenyans should not fear. You can change Ruto and bring someone else. And when you feel that person is not and Ruto is still available, you can still return him. Yes. That is what mature democracy is. But in this country, there is a lot of fear-mongering. A lot of fear-mongering. The other lesson is the power of social media. Elon Musk. The founder of Twitter was behind Trump. I remember up to last day of campaign, he was in one of the states campaigning and, you know, he's been a very strong supporter of Twitter. But someone says because he was advocating for free speech. Of course, that was a problem. He's really run into troubles with the Biden administration. And Twitter is a vote mobilization tool. Look at what happened during Gen Z protest. The Twitter was a strong tool during Gen Z protest because those Twitter space chats were really going on in the night, and that was the tool where Kenyans spoke about issues that were affecting the country. And in fact, I don't know whether US voted on emotions. I'm not a voter there. I'm not so in-depth into it, but you can also tell us, did they vote with emotions? The other lesson is agenda card in elections is very weak. I have a friend here who was telling me that Democrats, even after realizing that, of course, Biden really performed poorly in the first debate with Trump, and of course also as his health flaws and all that, the Democrats realized they needed to change the ticket. But in picking Kamala Harris, who was Biden's deputy, it was a plan. It had a gender card in it, and in fact, even in that election, there were opinion polls that were being done on the gender aspect and those how many are voting on gender. This is a card that has also been tried in Kenyan politics. We tried it in 2022. It failed. I don't know. I don't want to say it failed. In Kenya, I don't want to give a verdict it failed because that election was just something else. But in the US, Kamala Harris was also bringing that gender card. Of course, I've seen some of the statistics from that election. More women voted for Trump, for Biden, for Kamala, more than men. But the overall tally, Biden is still the president. So that means it was not that much effective. It is not just a casual thought that if I have a woman, then all women will vote for that. It then shows that it It is not very weak. Yes, it has a decisive factor, but it's very weak to an extent that we should always anchor our campaigns on the policies and other parameters that we put in place. The other issue is smear campaigns in election is very dangerous. Now, incumbents seem to run smear campaign against, seem to use the state machinery to run smear campaign against opponents. You can count multiple times Trump was in multiple times that the Trump was in the court on several cases. He's really been dragged in court on several cases, and that is why I'm even saying, of course, with the U.S. elections, with the U.S. Democrat, it's a bit different. And if you look at those cases, you will agree with me that Trump was not that clean per se. So smear campaign in elections, but he has overcome all those obstacles to go to the White House. And lastly, I'm just making a prediction. Republicans are not like Democrats. And if Trump is not careful, the same way he was facing impeachment when he was a president in his first term, he will still face several impeachments in this term. Because some of those cases on impeachments, if you read the cases, was the cases that were facing him by the time he was facing impeachment, are very legitimate cases. So I think even as he comes back into office, he must really be different. He must play a different ballgame altogether. Otherwise, it is not really true. Things are not going to be that friendly on his side. Thank you. It's Penina Nyambura. This was huyu ndio shosh, alikuwa peke yake. And let me just tell you how we provided solutions there. Huyu shamba alikuwa naisha alipewa, yes, they were given those allotment letters. But apparently nyumba alijengewa ilishanguka. So the grandchildren ndio walikuwa nyumba zao zilikuwa ziko hapo. So she was just using a makeshift structure. Now what would happen is when the grandchildren come, alisema she feels unsafe or she feels like anawafinyilia. Now she has to leave and go back to that kitchen, which is now the house in alikuwa amejengewa. So this house was built for Nyambura. She will use it alone, peke yake, and she was very happy. And may God bless you. Now, that is Penina Nyambura. This other one is Alice Kamande. But then apparently Alice akona watoto 6, she told us. Akona watoto 6. There is only one, yule mwenye mwana pale, tulikuwa na yeye. I think I showed her in the video. But the others awako there, and what she could not directly say, but we also gathered kwamba alcohol and illicit brew, it's a big problem. So she's also gotten that place. Malikuwa nalala ni kwa nyumba kingine kadogo ya mbao, and it was also destroyed. So she's got another one, and then the last one is Mzee Njuguna Munyu. Yeah, Njuguna Munyu. This one here, yeye pia anaishi peke yake actually in that home. Yes, anaishi peke yake. And he was telling me yeye ndiye alikuwa ananiambia hana choo. Yeah, so I tried telling some people there, nimeona huko wameweka stima. At least the local community sasa wale ambao the MCA there, they are trying to get contact awajengee mzee show, ajengee mzee choo. Yeah, na pia ikewe maji so that mzee apate usaidizi. But if one of you will be willing, I can be able to directly link you so that mnaweza jengea mzee choo. Yeah, hiyo ndio shida pekee sasa yanabaki nayo. But of the house, he's gotten a house. And thank you, we've made an impact. That for sure, guys, I can tell you, we've really made good impact. If you want to partner with Granny Care in future, the number is there. And I want to tell you, Granny Care is the symbolic, the flagship project of the Bold Network. God willing, we are going to register it to a full foundation. We are in that process. But Granny Care is our project now. So this is a project that will move across different counties. We've done Kilifi, we've been to Kisumu, now we're in Nyandarua. We will go somewhere else. But if you want to partner with us and know more about, contact us and you can continue supporting. Hata kama unataka kujenga ingine ya Kilifi uliona, you can still reach out, you can still link and build another one if you want to support someone else. And now that is the program.